And Halim.
Yep. Hi, Halim here. I'm an application developer, Essential Interactive.
Yeah, so together we will be your moderators for tonight's event. So the just one.
Hey guys, just give us a minute. I think Fabian is trying to reconnect.
Hi, good eve- good evening again. So sorry, there was a bit of a technical issues here. Okay, so before we jump into the main event, we'd just like to introduce who we are as Techractive. So, Eugene, next slide. Yeah. So we are Techractive. We're a bunch of geeks from Accenture Interactive who are interested in technology. So what we do on a daily basis is we do help multinational companies to build like technologies and to envision what kind of technology platforms and what kind of vision they will look in the future. And with this audience today, we would like to share how this technology would actually potentially change and benefit the world. And we would also, from our end, like to understand the impact of our work and understand how, from our perspective and yours, how it would change the way our life is going to be like. So through our online and offline engagement, we wish to build like a community of software developers and digital enthusiasts, which is why everyone, you guys are here today. And through this online channel, we would also like to discuss the important topics and trends in the technology space with the tech community. And finally, with this competitive market, we would like to guide the technologists or aspiring technologists in remaining competitive as this dynamic market shift.
Okay, so let me begin with today's topic. So we'll start it with the art of blending design technology. I believe Fabian has mentioned that we build technology and technology platforms for our clients, multinational clients. More importantly, that in all of these platforms, there is a UI and UX, which is user interfaces and user experience, and they have a big role to play in it. So to deliver good UI and UX, pretty sure that our designers and developers do have to work closely together. However, there is this gap where designers and developers have. From the designer point of perspective, definitely they will think of how to deliver the best experience, and also how to push the boundaries of what's possible. And on the developer end itself, like myself, I will think of how feasible it is to implement each of these features, and also with the time constraint given by a project, let's say, what priorities do I prioritize? Is it the accuracy or is it the functionality? Next slide. So without further ado, we'll jump to the heart of today's topic, which is Design Language System, or DLS for short. Here's the agenda for this evening. We'll go into the crash course of what DLS is and why do we need it. Then we'll head into a panel discussion plus a Q&A segment. I'll hand it over to our first speaker, Anika Deng. She's a senior user experience designer from Accenture Interactive. Anika, would you like to give a short intro?
Oh, Kanika, I think you're on mute.
Oh, hello. Sorry, I was on mute. Hi, I'm Anika. I'm a senior user experience designer consultant for Accenture for about 3 years. Uh, we work on several government projects and some private banking projects as well. And also, we work closely with Joe, who's also a part of this call on the DLS. Yeah. So, should I start the sharing now, Fabian?
Yes, please, Anika, you can proceed.
Okay, so today's topic we are sharing about the DLS, which is like the design language system. So what is it, right? What is a DLS? So a DLS is actually a framework, right, that consists of like reusable components, standards and documentations. And what we mean by components, we are talking about like buttons, global navigation, global footers, cards, and other standard components that we usually have. And also we couple it with documentations such as some recommendations, rules and guidelines on how to use some of these components and how to reuse it. So it then becomes the single source of truth for the development team and also for the design team and also for the client to refer to the DLS and so that we can align everyone. So how is it different from web style guide or pattern library? I guess for a lot of designers and for a lot of other design projects that we have worked with, commonly we start off with like a web style guide, or we usually start off some projects with a web style guide or pattern library. And what is different from that and a DLS is that it consists of standards and documentation. So the key difference is really the guidelines, the rules, the recommendations, the do's and don'ts, right? That is what defines a DLS to be a DLS. A DLS ensures reusability, scalability, and also the evolution of the components in the system that we develop over time. So just now I said, right, that the DLS is a framework that we combine reusable components. One of these common frameworks, or very popular framework, is the Atomic Design System by Brett Frost. So the Atomic Design System goes with the ideas of how atoms, we start off with atoms as the most basic the start of the most basic item, which is like the atoms, right? And then when we combine the atoms together, we get molecules. And when we combine molecules, we get organisms. And then we get templates and pages. So this is one of like the example of a framework that we can start off with or we can use. Every design and every project, we use like different kind of frameworks that governs the DLS, but the most common one would be the Atomic Design System. So in the next slide, we can see like what is atoms, right? Atoms are made up of like buttons, icons, typography, images, size of images, and other functionalities and basic atoms or atomic things that build up into bigger things, like smaller basic foundational things like color, typography. And then when we combine all these small icons, buttons together, we get like a navigation, we get a card, an image, some like functionality, some likes things. And then when we combine all these together, we get a card, which is an organism and a navigation. And when we combine the navigation and the card together, we get a page, a template that we can fill in with content, then that will become a page. So this is like a basic, like a understanding overview on how we form, how we make things and fill up the framework with components. So this is just an example from Brett Frost. And so then we arrive at our next slide, which is the most important question that everybody wants to know, right? Why do we need a DLS? Like, what are the benefits of why we need a DLS? And one is, as I mentioned, right, it creates a single source of truth. It's the one place of reference for all the teams across all tracks, right, to refer to as a single source of truth for the brand, for the company, for the client, for all the development team, the QA team, the design team, and everyone else to work together. We refer to a single source of truth, which is the DLS. And then the DLS can enable us to scale because it provides guidelines and recommendations to allow iterations, to allow evolution, to allow us to scale, and therefore it is quite important if we want to handle a project and run a long scale project and big scale project with them. So then the next question will be very important, right? When we are running agile projects, we are very concerned with velocity and time to market. How fast we can run a project, actually, the faster the better it is. So having a highly structured, organized components and UI kits and recommendation guidelines, all that, right? Combined with the agile process, you can do your designs much faster and you can develop it faster as well, and therefore increase the velocity at which it goes to market. So the next point would be to create better value and better experience, because with the DLS, it governs all the UI and all the look and feels and all the physical digital elements, and also the brand elements. You can actually use the DLS to adapt it to other digital products. So let's say you start off with a web, your project with a web digital platform, you can then adapt the DLS and all the components, right, to a mobile app, for example, and therefore you can create consistent user experience and interaction throughout with the product, and so that the users will have less friction and adaptation to whatever the company's products that they will be releasing to the market, right? And because once the products, let's say your app and your web have the same UI, the brand value grows and the product visibility is increased. So then the next point would be how you have less time and money spent on the project and on maintaining and all these components, right? Because velocity grows, and I guess for Accenture, right, in our projects, we run a lot of agile projects, and we are very concerned with timelines, velocity, and everything that as long as we can move, whatever helps to move the project faster, we are more concerned with that, right? So then the DLS were able to help us to do that with the reusable components and solutions. Development team would take less time to redevelop these things over and over again, and so the designers can also focus on developing developing solutions to real problems rather than recreating all these assets over and over again. And then lastly, the point is that we will have then clean design and code. So when we have a single source of truth and a library of components, design team can just easily grab these components and use them, right, however they want. And when these components get updated, their files and their designs gets updated with the updated components as well. So then in this sense, there'll be less rework done and easier to maintain components. So when one source of truth gets updated, the other files all gets updated, and it works the same way as code as well. We have a single storybook. For example, in some of our projects, we use storybook to maintain all the front-end codes for all these components. So when we do update the code base, the development team will just have to grab the new code and update it on their end as well. So it's much faster for development team. So I have reached the end of my sharing.
Thanks, Anika, for the crash course on DLS. I'm pretty sure it's very interesting for all of us. So we've come to the panelist discussion segment. We are inviting Anika and two more of our panelists, Joel Ling and Rebecca Tan. So Joel Ling is a senior experience designer with Accenture Interactive, while Rebecca Tan is a front-end developer of Accenture Interactive. Can you invite them to intro themselves?
Joel, you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Joel. I'm a senior experience designer in Accenture Interactive. So like Anika, I work with many projects in Accenture and also dealing with DLS as well. So for our recent project, I've worked with Anika on this DLS, and Rebecca as well.
Okay, hello guys. So nice seeing all of you. My name is Rebecca. So I am a full stack developer, but mainly working on front end stuff recently, and I'm in the same project as Anika and Joel. So I used to do UI UX in other places as well. So I'm one of the odd breed of developer that actually like both design and development lah. Yeah, so can't wait to share more about what we do over the panel discussion lah. Okay, yeah. So shall we get started?
Yeah, thanks for introduction, Anika, Joel, and Rebecca. So just also kind of like an additional introduction, right? We've worked together with both three of them, and they are really talented designers and developers in their own field. So today we're very very fortunate to kind of have them to share how the designers and the developers will actually work together on the design language system. So for those who just joined earlier, or maybe like few minutes ago, you kind of missed a little on Anika's sharing, but no worries. We're jumping into the fireside chat where we will kind of share more from and learn from Anika, Joel's, and Rebecca's perspective on and their experiences in Accenture Interactive. So I know some of you will have already some burning questions from Anika sharing earlier. We have set up a Menti website for you to input all your questions. So if you see on the top of this screen, you see a code 19724558. So go to menti.com and enter this code, and you'll be able to submit your questions. And at the end of the fireside chat segment, we'll pick some of these questions to ask our three panelists. So Halim, why not let's start with some of our burning questions we have.
Yep, definitely. I will get the ball rolling first. Okay, so Anika, thanks for the explanation on the DLS just now. So from what I understand, that DLS is a framework meant to create a single source of truth, maintaining consistency for better user experience. I think the more important question is, how do we start to create DLS from scratch?
Okay. I guess Joe can help to chip in as well. So, how do you start to create a DLS from scratch? I would love to say that it's based on experience, but of course, gaining experience means looking and benchmarking at what other companies have done, especially like what material design, Google material design has done, IBM's Carbon, Airbnb's DLS system. And also, I think there's a lot of other companies out there and other newsletters and or design newsletters that they commonly share like how what DLS does and what are some basic components that you could start off with and how do you design. So you have to start researching and see like what are some of the common components that all these other companies are in their in their libraries. What do they have, and you can start off with what they already have and then do it your way, right, for the project. If they start off, they have buttons, you start with buttons, and then you start from there. You start building components by components, and you start looking through the list. What are some of the components that you think that you need for your project, and what are the components that you need based on what you assume like you might need in the future and stuff. And of course, it depends on when you start the DLS. Based on experience, right, DLS is supposed to kickstart at the end of the project because it's supposed to be like an audit, like a design audit where you compile all your design components, common components and everything, and compile it into like a library, and all the thinking, all the logic and everything, you start to document them down, how you've been using it, right, at the end of the project. But then there are some cases where you do it concurrently with the project, which is like the project that we are currently in. We run it, the DLS is run concurrently with the design squads and the development team, right? So then when we kickstart the DLS, we start off by first providing all the basic components that the designers will need. So what are some of these components? They will be like a buttons, navigation bar, global header, global footer, cards, tools, snack bar, loaders, and form fields. Also, these are some of like the common components that we can kickstart with. And then thus providing the designers with some basic components that allows them to start doing their designs. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Anika, for sharing. I just want to add, like, it may seem like Anika is saying, "Oh, we copy from Google, we copy from Airbnb," but in reality, what users actually need is some form of consistency, lah, and in essence, basically, that's what we're trying to do, right? When we are copying from these other established design patterns, is just to set up the backbone for something that is consistent, that users, when they use our design system, is not something, a new interaction to them. And DLS is very much like an iterative process. So we start from the most basic. As the product grows, as we design more features, as we go through more design sprints, the DLS will have a skeleton to fall back on, right? Yeah, a very strong base structure to iterate from there.
Yeah, so I hear from the point that on DLS, what we mentioned as component is essentially the different parts of like breaking a website or an app down into the different parts, right? For example, a navigation bar can be a component, or like a banner could be like a component, which essentially helps the developers, help the marketer, and help like the designers to componentize and to develop them quicker. So maybe just for like non-designers and some of the non-designers here in the audience, right? What kind of tools do you guys use in the project? And maybe you could share a bit on the tools that you use and recommend, and some of the tools out there which you would like to also explore.
So some of the common design tools that we use for design, we use Sketch and we use Figma, and then of course there's also Adobe XD, which is also quite popular. But recently we have grown to very much prefer to use Figma because of the collaborative thing that they have, that we can actually see what other people are doing, changes on the fly and stuff. We can do collaborative work much quicker and faster, and it's like a live sharing thing. So we much prefer using Figma. And also Figma allows us, just like Sketch, right, and XD, they are sort of similar, but a bit different in terms of their UI, but they are quite similar. They allow the functionality of creating your own library, and then from there you can drag and drop some of their library components into your design. And when you update the library, these components that you have used previously will also get updated as long as they are linked to a library. So it gives you that convenience when you are doing design, and when components get updated, you also get updated components. So these are some of the tools that we commonly use in Accenture and in our projects. And I think it's one of the industry standard tools that we use, that they use as well. Yeah. And I think for the DLS in terms of development, right? I think maybe Rebecca can share about like Storybook and what other platforms that you can use to house the components that is being coded.
Yeah, so right now in our current project, we are using the Storybook. So Storybook is a rather established like a component library, kind of where people house their code as well as the component UI, as well as you can actually put guidelines in there as well. So we are currently using that. I have previously used like the bits.dev as well. So this is another alternative to similar things. So you will see that many of these different options are just different UI to get the same purpose done. It's just yeah. So I think that Storybook is a pretty robust tool that we have been using, and it has been serving us quite well lah. So that's what we have been using in terms of development side when we actually again inspect the DLS components and use these codes respectively. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. That was great sharing for just the first question. Let me move on to the next one. Okay. So the next question here is open to any of our panelists here. So how does having a design language system affect your workflow? Maybe we get two sides of perspective from designers and developers. Anyone can just start with the ball.
Maybe I start first. Okay, so firstly, right, I think DLS speeds up the development process quite a lot because conventionally, right, given like let's say application design, what a developer has to do is that we are supposed to be the one slicing these components, these designs into the respective components, like in terms of atoms, molecules, organism, etc. So since the DLS is following this kind of atomic concepts, right, it's very easy for us to just go straight to building without going through that process of doing the slicing. So we can go straight to building itself already. And if these like so-called Lego blocks, right, already existed previously, right, what we can do is literally to just go and copy and paste those reusable code, and that actually expedites the entire development process significantly lah. Yeah, so and assuming that all these Lego blocks are built with like the best practices, right, it also means that it's much easier for us to like propagate that quality of code throughout multiple like applications, throughout multiple projects per se. Yeah, so it's easier to like establish that kind of standards. And I think it also promotes like the parallelism between the design track as well as the development track, because like the concept of new components and reusing it is the same for like both our design side and the development side lah. So in terms of component enhancement, new components, all these both our side are quite parallel. So I think DLS is definitely a bridge between like the developer and the designer. And then after, very important because something developer get a lot is something like looks different from Figma, for example. So when people say looks different from Figma, they never say what exactly is different from Figma. It's very hard to pinpoint, right? So with DLS, you can really go and inspect every layer and find out the exact like differences between your HTML and the DLS side. So it also helps in troubleshooting lah, in terms of DLS, how it helps my development workflow. Yeah, so that's for the development side. So anyone want to share about the design side?
Okay, maybe I can share a bit from the design workflow. I think Rebecca very well explains like how it actually bridges the gap between design and our engineers. But maybe I can share a bit like how it actually helps between designers to designers lah. Because like what Rebecca said, everything is modular, right? So designers can just plug and play certain things, and it really helps open up the workflow to enable designers to quickly mock up certain things, especially for components that have already been very established, have been reused quite often already. So those can be reused really quickly lah. Yeah, the other thing, it also forces designers like to create their components like how a developer would use it. So it forces us to actually understand how things are being coded, so everybody get the same understanding of how the component works, and so it really helps designers to create design, right, that is closer to reality. Like we know that it can actually work. Yeah. So anyone else have anything to add?
Okay, so I guess to explain clearer, right? Joel is part of the design track in our current project, and then I'm leading the DLS track, and then Rebecca is doing the front end track. So when Joel's team designs something, it comes to me, and then from me it goes to Rebecca, right? So in that sense, because between me and Rebecca, I'm sort of managing like the components, the cleanliness of the components, and also making sure that whatever the designers wants to achieve is being achieved by the development team, right? Such as logics, component behaviors, specific rules and guidelines and stuff, right? Because we hold that guideline, we know we understand the components, and because we understand how the designers and what the designers are thinking when they are going through all the design sprints and going through all the designs with the clients, we understand the logic, the thinking, and the purpose of the components and stuff. So when we communicate to the developers, our job is also to understand how the development team does their job, how is it being coded, how does it work, how is it going to how are they going to implement some of these things that we would like to achieve, right? So then we kind of, for me, in my team, we kind of help bridge the gap between the development team and the design team by transferring some of this knowledge back and forth between these two teams, right? And what helps, what benefits that we clearly saw with this workflow, right, is that we really do get better and higher quality development output from the entire process. Design has way less bugs than previous in other projects, and also the designs are way closer to what the designers intend to be, and there's less fixing, less problems, and everything is much smoother with the DLS working in this workflow. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do see like a very good synergy between you three, where Anika, you're like the DLS lead, and you are the kind of like the command tower with between the designer and developer, and thereby you did mention there is an improvement in the quality, right? So that definitely would help a project in terms of the delivery, and then in terms of the processes, I do hear like there are some. It's like a modularization and componentization of the design work, which essentially removes like the interpretation from Rebecca's end in a sense of how we treat the design work, and this would significantly reduce the amount of bugs and the amount of issues that may possibly come out during the process, which kind of leads me to our next question, right? So you mentioned this DLS as a single source of truth between all of the stakeholders over here. So maybe you can elaborate a bit on like how the other stakeholders around you benefit from the utilization of this DLS.
Okay, I guess the very first and benefit that, of course, the stakeholders gain is alignment. Alignment between the whole entire Accenture team. The development is very clear on what they need to develop. The components are clear, precise, logically documented. Everything that they need is there. And then the design team has also clearly documented all the rules, the regulations, the recommendations, the do's and don'ts and stuff, right? Everything is very clear. And so when it comes to sort of going, like sort of the client sees that actually we work in a very methodological process, and they also start to understand why some components are being designed in a certain way, and how actually we help with the whole entire process of reusing some of the components. It's how do we say this? Like, it's much easier to convince the clients how to design the components up to a certain standard of like the best practices, and how we can uphold that, right? It's yeah, it's better that way, like, but I don't think I'm very explaining it clearly. Maybe Joe, you wanna chip in?
I don't quite get what you're saying also. Yeah. I guess the point is really just that there's less ambiguity, right, in when we design, and also like when we design something, it is really consistent lah. Like when we design whatever we build on Figma, the way we group the layers and the way we space everything out, right, will reflect exactly how it's built, or almost exactly lah. I mean, definitely when you build on front end, it's a bit different. Yeah. So I guess that's
Maybe let me kind of rephrase that question in a bit of the different way, right? How does it benefit like the other stakeholders outside your design, outside the team of three of you? Maybe the marketers like myself, or like the QA team, yeah, or even the client, as you mentioned.
So
Maybe
let me make up for my lack of clarity in what I was saying. Okay, I just wanted to be more ambiguous earlier because I didn't want to bring in specific examples, but I don't think I can escape that. So I think one of the benefits, right, is that our current client has their own design team, and we work with them to develop this current designs, and also work with them to develop the DLS that we currently have. And of course, our scope of work is clearly defined, which is web digital experience, right? But they currently also have their own app, and when we develop this DLS for them, they do use it to internally as a source of truth and as a design recommendation guideline, right, to aid their design in developing the app as well. So then they are utilizing this DLS as the governance for all their digital platforms, and also part of their marketing efforts as well, to align the colors, the typography that's used offline and online in all aspects. So in some ways, the DLS helps in various aspects of like where design is involved, right? All the look and feel and all that is involved, all the marketing stakeholders, communications, managers, and everyone, they would then look at the DLS and say like, okay, so these are the guidelines on how to apply and use typography, colors, images, and also then this actually gives them better brand, stronger presence for their brand, and also standardize their look and feel consistently on all platforms. Yeah.
The other specific example I can think of is for writers, because when we deal with website, usually there's a lot of content. So having a fixed modular component, right? The writers are able to know exactly how much to write, or how many segments and things like that, and how the content will flow in each design. So that's one thing that actually with the DLS, right, it allows the product manager to see, it allows the writers to see how all the design come together so that they can plan for the content.
Another one that I can think of is the quality assurance people for sure. So like usually when they have to do quality assurance, right, they need to have a basis to test against, right? So the DLS with its guideline, with its UI in place, right, it gives them exact benchmark to compare against. So when they compare the development output against the DLS, what DLS has written, it's easier for them to log issues and bugs and assign to the right people, be it developer like myself, or maybe it's a design issue because there's some inconsistency. It's much easier to do the attribution of what went wrong, that kind of thing, with the presence of DLS. Yeah.
Thanks, guys, for the input. Seems that there's a lot of information. I think all of us are trying to absorb at one go, but it's an interesting one. Okay, so we are moving on to the next question. As we know that DLS incorporates all the components of atoms, like icons, into molecules, organism, and also that when DLS is in play, it's not only just one designer. We're talking about a lot of people. So my question here is that how do you maintain and scale DLS?
So I think Joe mentioned earlier, the DLS is an iterative process. Um, so when we start off with the first version of the DLS, right, it's not going to last through the end of the project. Throughout the whole duration of the project, the DLS will then have to go through evolution on its own, where it will start to reinvent itself and start to change and adapt to the project needs. And therefore, in my current project where the DLS, we have gone through about 3 to 4 rounds of changes and upgrading to actually meet the needs of the project. And therefore, we change because the project requires a certain amount of details or does not require a certain amount of details, so we scale back on certain things and we change and improve certain things. If there's lack of clarity, we increase clarity to it. And of course, as the project scales, right, the components get more complicated and more complex because you start off with very basic foundational components. And when project gets bigger and the problems get more complex, you start to have more design UI solutions for it. And so then the only way to scale is to always have common, always set some ground rules, some foundational guidelines on how do you, on certain components, for example, like one of the rules and guidelines that we always have is that how reusable is this component? If the component is going to be only used once in one specific use case, right, it's not going into the DLS. It's not going to go through because it means that this component may not be reusable in the future and it may be a one-time off thing. So when we design components and stuff, we need to be very strict in certain ways, and we need to look and review the components, like, is this going to be only used once? Is it going to be used multiple times? Where is it going to be used? How is it going to be used? Is the components going to be scalable? So most of the time, I would advise the designers to design components that are very scalable, in a sense that we make certain components a Frankenstein components, and we are like, yeah, we really, sometimes we advise against and sometimes we advise to go with Frankenstein components, but Frankenstein components are mishmash of certain things to make it more reusable and scalable in a certain way. So our Frankenstein components are quite scary in some sense because it's really quite a very large components, but then this component will ensure that it can be used and can be scalable for the future and can have many permutations. I guess one thing about components is that does this component allow permutations? The more permutations it allows the designers to have, the better it is, because then it means that at different scenarios, different situations, different states, different parts of the pages, the solution, right, we can use this component in various ways. And therefore, in our current project, right, I'm quite proud of the design team because they have really stretched that to the maximum capacity and the potential of the component itself, in such that when I am questioned by the client, how reusable are these components, I'm very confident that they have met that criteria for it to stand in the DLS. So that is one advice I would give on how to make sure that how you can scale and maintain your DLS is to go through iterations, always upgrade and make sure that components allow for permutations and variations. Joe, Rebecca.
I think Rebecca have anything to add?
Maybe I can share like how is it different without DLS. So I feel like component maintenance, right, without DLS is quite messy. So DLS already make the job of like component maintenance a lot easier because I've worked in places where like maybe I need to use a date picker. So so then there's like 6 different date picker to choose from. Then which one should I use? Then somebody just say, oh, use the one that you need the month picker. Then just pick the one that have month picker lor. Then in the end, there's 3 date picker with month picker. So I also don't know which one to use. So there are a lot of cases like that where a lot of people use different things to fulfill the same purpose, and hence they don't really maintain like whatever they use for that one-time usage kind of thing, and that causes a lot of component maintainability issue. So DLS itself, given that it has like it tries to limit how many variants you have, given that it's more use case specific kind of thing. Like it is supposed to be like only when you need it then you have it kind of thing, right? It actually helps to make component maintenance a lot better for developers lah. So that's from a developer's perspective. I feel like component maintenance is definitely the process is improved with DLS lah.
I just want to chime in a bit about enhancement, right? Just now Nika mentioned it's about reusability, and Rebecca also about reusability, and also creating some sort of generic rule or a very broad base rule that is scalable as we build the product lah. But in terms of enhancement, because it's modular, right, we can also add on like to this module. So it really doesn't, whenever we change stuff and we add on or we build up on certain rules, right, and to make it more fit to form, we can always do it quite easily because it's modular, and it really enables designers to not be afraid to fail lah. So meaning that, you know, if the rule is too generic, we want to kind of scale it down, we want to scale it up, we can always enhance, and the enhancement only goes to certain modules and certain components, and it is quite easier lah than if we were not to have DLS.
Becca and Joel for the sharing earlier on. I think it's time for us to move to the Q&A section. So based on what we have on our Mentimeter, so the first question that we have here is, how long did it take for your team to build DLS? How many designers and developers are maintaining and documenting DLS?
For the designers, because we have 3 design squads, so we have 3 designers on it, including me. So we have 3 designers supporting 3 design squads, because and also the DLS team run concurrent with the design squad. So they run sprints. DLS team doesn't run sprint, but it's quite crazy, to be honest, because for the first 2 weeks, the designers are designing, and then when they reach the last week, which is nearing the end of the sprint, the components are more or less finalized, and that is when DLS team gets crazy, because we have to be updated by the first day of the next sprint, which is the next week, Monday. So for us, we work with tight timelines, and we try to implement certain processes, handover processes, and get visibility on the components, the complexity of the components, and from the beginning of the sprint. And we sit in for the design reviews, and we sit in for all the meetings, and so that we understand what's going on and what's coming up next, so that we can prepare for the final week of the sprint, where the DLS team will start their work on component refactoring and start to move all these new components or enhancements into the DLS. And then it will be Rebecca's team after that. After it moves into the DLS, the Figma file for the designers, it will then go to Rebecca.
I struggle to answer how many developers is involved in the entire development thing, because like so we have DLS specific developers who actually just develop these like atoms, molecules, organisms purely for the DLS components that Anika's team built. So that one we have, I think, around 4 people previously. I'm not sure how many now. Yeah. Then we have a lot of other design like developers like streams of work that we are doing. So I really cannot give a specific answer of how many developer does it take to, contribute to the entire DLS process, because I think it varies from projects to projects. And for specific for like our project, for example, because of the fact that we are running concurrently, right? So there are cases where the developers are developing something that is not in DLS yet, and then it will eventually move to the DLS also. And so there's no fixed answer lah. I really don't have a fixed answer for the number of developers it takes to contribute to DLS per se. Yeah.
I think the other part of the question is about time, right? How much time to set up? Really, there is no fixed time also. Right? So like just now, what Anika mentioned at the start, we have to rebuild this baseline, and that could, I mean, if we really want to gorilla the whole process, it would take probably maybe a couple of weeks, maybe like 4 weeks. But then if really we want something that is more complete, probably up to a couple of months lah. So then after that is really going through the sprint cadence to add on to the DLS. So yeah, it is really about how much we want to complete the DLS before we start the sprint process.
Yeah, so I just let you all know, design squads, we have about, in total we have 3 design squads, so about 3 to 4 designers per squad. And so in total we have about 9 to 12 designers at one point, and 3 DLS persons supporting these 9 designers. And then we have 4 to 5 developers supporting them. So this is quite a big project, right? But then of course the number of people you need is relative to the number of designers you need to support. So in that sense, the less designers you have running the actual project, then of course you will then scale down accordingly lah. So it's in ratio based. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, that's amazing. So we have 2 minutes more. Actually, we took a little bit more time for the Q&A, but I think we just wanted to kind of have like 3 actionable takeaways from today's sharing. So if there were any 3 of them to improve like the design or like the development, what would you give our audiences?
Sorry, can you repeat that again, that question?
So maybe 3 actionable insights for us in improving our design.
Joel, you have Rebecca, do you know any insights?
I think maybe for design side, I have one tip lah. It's not really actionable, but for DLS, right, is to start small. Really to just start from the most basic, and don't be afraid to get everything complete up and running. Start small, start with the simpler stuff. Just make it as generic and as scalable as possible, right? Such that you can get the project running, right? So as we start building on, even though some things we may change, it actually doesn't matter, because once we set up the process, right, and the process will guide us through to be able to make the change lah. Yeah.
I guess from the developer's perspective, right, there's a couple of things. So firstly, I think look at Figma more often. Definitely, you need to look at it and commit to looking at it. Then other than that, I think it's very important for developers to know how to communicate the discrepancies, because sometimes DLS may have some things like some guidelines already, right? But some designs may not be exactly abiding by the DLS rule, and maybe it's just genuine just misstep out, that kind of thing. So don't be afraid as a developer to question some things, because this misalignment is better to be resolved early than later. So I guess really just look at, as a developer, just commit to looking at Figma more often, because that's basically what you need to get your first product up, and it's also what you need when people question whatever you develop, and then after that communicate any queries you have, because any query is valid lah, unless it is really nonsensical. But yeah, that's what I have. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Figma as the center of the universe. Okay,
Um,
thank you.
To Rebecca's point about communication, I guess I'm really thankful, right, for this project, because all the developers and that we have worked with, and all designers, we have a very close collaborative atmosphere amongst us. Like, we are very collaborative, and we always talk to each other, communicate about each other about what can be done, what cannot be done, what's the best way to solve something and stuff like that. I think communication is very, very, very important. And on top of that, I think my last tip is that make your components permutable. Have create components that allows or supports variations and different sort of permutations for scalability, and also always have this mindset where you are not at the best place yet, so that you can always improve and keep improving and keep improving, and that the DLS is not the end of everything, right? It doesn't mean that when you get it to a good place, it will forever be good. It's actually a ongoing living document that you have to keep updating, and it keeps evolving along with time lah.
Yeah.
Thank you
With
so
that,
much.
I think we end of the Q&A section. Yep. Thanks to Anika,
I know,
Joanne, and Rebecca for their wonderful insights.
Yeah.
Definitely.
There are still a lot of questions we have from the mentee. Unfortunately, we cannot cover them, but do reach out to them via LinkedIn if you are interested in learning more. So with that, we have come to the end of Q&A. Just want to give like an introduction for our next event. We are hosting it on 29 June on growing asset technologies in the consulting industry. So you do hear about being a technologies in like the big tech, in financial industry, but we do also have a lot of technologies like Halim. So for this, right, we have Fabricio, who is the head of digital platforms and delivery in Accenture Interactive. He has over a decade of experience just in this space to kind of do our sharing, and also myself to do this sharing from someone who recently joined the consulting industry. So with that, we've come to the end. Feel free to send us feedback or join us the mailing list by scanning this QR code at the bottom right of this page. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for coming. Bye bye.